I'm delighted to introduce Dr. Peter Pisters, President and CEO MD Anderson, who will moderate the discussion. Dr. Pisters built his career for 20 years as a cancer surgeon, researcher, professor, and administrator. He lives at the front line against cancer. Dr. Paul Cherukuri is Rice University's first Vice President for Innovation. As Chief Innovation Officer, Cherukuri leads Rice's technology and commercialization infrastructure. He is trained in the spectrum of tech innovation. At the end of the day, Paul seeks to take Rice's innovations and turn them into businesses that can touch everyone's lives in a meaningful way, in areas from healthcare to aerospace. David Hall is a general partner for the Washington, D.C.-based venture capital firm Revolution Ventures. Specifically, he leads the Rise of the Rest strategy, which seeks the best early-stage investments in the mid-country, investing across a wide range of technologies, a third of which typically backs healthcare and life science companies. Dr. Kush Parmer is the general partner of 5AM Ventures, a life science-focused venture capital firm based in Boston and in the Bay Area. 5AM investments start early in the private company's life and focus on drug discovery and development and platform technologies in a broad range of specialties, ranging from infectious diseases to oncology. So with that, over to you, Dr. Pisters.
Well, thank you so much. It's great to be with all of you. This might be close to the last session, but we're going to make it one of the most exciting ones that you've seen today with our discussion. Given the time constraints, I'm going to jump right in to foster what we hope will be an exchange between all of us so that we're working together to really flesh out a lot of the important issues in tech transfer and discovery and innovation for healthcare. So maybe I can start, Kush, with yourself. With the background and understanding that the Texas Medical Center is really the world leader in federal funding for research, and that creates an amazing amount of discovery and innovation that comes out of the labs here. What do you see, based on your experience in Boston and elsewhere, as the keys to success for translating that science into new companies, into innovation, into patient benefit?
Dr. Pisters, thank you for the question. It's wonderful to be here and with my esteemed colleagues here as well. And thank you for all your patience and stamina and sticking through this late session in the day as well. Well, I would say, just taking a step back, healthcare and life sciences and societal impact, I'm probably preaching to the choir here, but you know, the past couple of years for myself, and I think for many of you as well, it's been a very potent reminder of the global relevance and very personal relevance of our industry and the innovations and the impact that they can have on our society, on our families, and on our communities. And you know, as you look at the industry today and how it's evolved, what used to be a very closed industry dominated by a few major players is now an industry with 800 public biotech companies, 80 to 90% of the medicines being approved by the FDA being not invented by a pharmaceutical company. So it's a much more distributed and more global and more globally impactful industry as well. And hence the fact that regions around the world are now really well poised, not just within the United States, but around the world to become great clusters and hubs for productivity in life sciences. Now, where that all comes from, the foundation is fundamental research. And the statistic you just mentioned is a really powerful one and a great metric of how much research is happening in a certain place and really is the envy of many other cities. I think the key things to understand beyond, okay, there's a lot of research being funded here, is what kind of research is being funded and how is that distributed? Because, you know, there's basic fundamental research that is being funded here, but what's really spectacular and special and unique here is the fact that a lot of that research is very clinically oriented as well. And there are hubs and other regions where you have one or the other, but lack one or the other, and here you have both. And it's that confluence that is really a key ingredient for productivity. The other pieces that I think that are critical for translating this research into productivity that's entrepreneurial is a desire. I think there has to be a desire at the institutional level, a cultural level, and then at the individual level. And it's very clear to me from some of the two of you here representing that and many others that at the institutional level, there are things that are financial, but there are also things that are not written and not financial in terms of the encouragement of entrepreneurship as something to look up to value beyond the academy and the traditional sort of development within the academy. And some of those things have changed tremendously, I think, in the past decade here, and bodes really well. It's an essential recruiting tool, I think, for top talent to bring the best and brightest physicians, scientists, and researchers from around the world here. Yes, quality of life will do that, but also it is them to have an outlet that's going to be supportive for entrepreneurship. So that is all there as well. I think what's really critical, in addition to that, is capital and connectivity. And the HX Venture Fund and institutions like this are a wonderful example. No great cluster, even Boston and San Francisco, they didn't get there by being insular, by the way. They got there by being highly connected, being open to the world, and no cluster is going to have it all. It is connectivity to other ecosystems that bring other complementary skills and people and perspectives to the table. So I think for myself, not being based here, but having built companies in Europe and Indiana and Florida, I really look to institutions that are catalysts like HX Venture Fund that bring the world to Houston in a highly curated, thoughtful, sophisticated way. So leave it at that.
That's great. I'm going to come back to the connectivity part because here we have TMC3 as an excellent example of connectivity of the future. But before doing that, Paul, I want to get your thoughts. You've got a unique role at Rice University, and perhaps not many institutions of higher education have a VP of innovation that's across the whole university. Tell us a little bit about that and how you see our own ecosystem here in Houston.
Well, thank you. Thank you again. Thank you to HX Venture Fund for setting this up. This has been a dynamic day, and I think it's dynamic naturally, and I think that's part of the reason why the Office of Innovation was constructed at Rice. It's a new office, new meaning about 3 weeks ago. I just took this role and I'm creating it as we go. And the reason was we recognize that innovation is actually a community effort. It's not just within Rice, but it's also external. It is a part of our community. How do we drive that forward? And what do we mean by creating this sort of innovation ecosystem? We all say it. I think what we're really trying to do is have impact in people's lives today. We want to be able to create solutions, tangible solutions for folks. And traditional academics, we were talking about this earlier, even before coming up here. Traditional academia has been in the Vannevar Bush model, who was the architect of university research enterprise. But we've moved beyond that. What we're talking about is trying to do something where we create practical solutions, and how do we get that to scale? This is not something we ever think about inside of a university. We generally write the paper, and we throw it over the hedges, and we say, let's let somebody else take the ball. And typically, there aren't people out there to catch it because we're waiting for a company or a startup to drive it forward. Well, instead of waiting, we're going to foster that. We're going to foster that through the students who are inside of Rice, and then bring people into our community to teach them how to do it. We say this all the time, that nerds like myself, we create new companies, and this is how the future is created. It's nerds that create the future. We don't communicate that well enough because we're nerds, and I think that's part of the problem. And we're going to address that and get that forward. The Office of Innovation is really bringing all the pieces together. We heard that a lot today in a lot of the sessions, that we haven't really integrated as much across the community to bring the pieces together. And Houston has it, right? Houston intrinsically has it. It has a natural diversity of thought and economy as well as just creativity. The ingenuity of Houston is what we're harnessing. And Rice, because of our position as a higher university, one of the top universities in the state of Texas, actually the top, I'm sorry to say that, but it's true. I'm not that sorry. We're very proud that we're one of the highest ranked universities in the country. We want people to know that. We want people to come here and partner with us to really help create the future. That is what our innovation ecosystem is about. And that's why we're partnering with the Texas Medical Center as well as other entities around the city to get that forward.
Well, the follow-up question that I have for you is that
Yeah.
when you set up a separate unit in a university, then that can cause certain faculty to see that as outsourced to that group, where you want innovation to be a capability that's diffused throughout the university. So how do you think about that, and how do you plan to offset that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Universities are great at creating administration, and I think if anything, we've been very innovative about that. And
I think
we're
he
not.
means bureaucracy.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
we do not want more bureaucracy. So, if anything, the Office of Innovation is the anti-bureaucratic world. The idea is that I'm not wanting the Office of Innovation to create more silos. And the way to do that, the easiest lubricant for that is money. And so we're going to provide resources for a lot of our faculty, a lot of our students to be founders and to be able to get trained up to really create this technology. The other thing that we're doing is de-risking a lot of our technology development. So, and we've seen this time and time again in startups, right? We were talking about this, I've talked about this all day with a lot of folks. A lot of times, technology comes out way too early from a university, and it's still a research project, and it ends up being put under an LLC or a C Corp or something to come out, and it's way too early, and it starts dying because they're still working out the kinks. Well, we're going to work out the kinks as much as possible inside, and then we're going to release it, and then VCs are going to take a look, and we're going to de-risk it so that you all, any of you venture folks, would like to invest in the technology, you're going to bet that we are going to give you something that's actually investable. That is an important part that we don't teach in the university, but a lot of the universities have had it in their ecosystem intrinsically. We're bringing that to Rice, and we're going to make sure that that's actually moving forward for a lot of our folks.
Thank you. David, from your standpoint, as you travel the country together with Kush, you look at different ecosystems and environments. What do you believe the essential ingredients are?
Yeah, well, first, it's an honor to be here. Thanks to my friends at HX Venture Fund, Guillermo, Sandy, Elise. It's wonderful to be here. And Dr. Pisters, as I said backstage, I am personally indebted to the folks at MD Anderson, the nurses, faculty, doctors at TMC. They've touched my family as they have so many of yours, and it's an honor to be on the stage with you and my other colleagues. You know, as we go around the country and we look at ecosystems, one of the things that's so inspiring is how regional healthcare is. You know, there's TMC here, there's Hopkins, there's Cleveland Clinic, there's Mayo. It's all, healthcare is very regional in nature because it has to serve the population. But what's really interesting is the solutions that work in Houston don't necessarily work or is as implementable to a New York population. What works in California isn't equally as applicable to Mississippi or a South Dakotan. And so I think thinking about healthcare both as like innovation to the human body, obviously, but also as sort of regional businesses which have to be tailored to their local consumers, the way of life that their local consumers have chosen to, how they've chosen to live. It really is important to make sure that, you know, the businesses listen to the customers. And it's not always that same appreciation because, you know, a human body is a human body is a human body. And I think as we see it just going around the country, I think there are two big things. Thing number one, making sure that there is connectivity, but that connectivity doesn't need to move monolithically. It's okay for there to be some fast accelerants and some leaders in these communities that help push the community forward. The second thing is recognizing that every great solution doesn't have to be homegrown. It's very okay to sort of import talent, import ideas, and adopt them so that they become your own, because that way it's still a victory for the local community, even if the idea or the lead researcher or the entrepreneur comes in from elsewhere. And then the third thing that we love to see is just making sure that the ecosystem leans in and sort of really leverages equity as the fulcrum. I talk a lot about how there's just such an underrepresentation of people of color in clinical trials, for example, which leaves huge swaths of the population out of the latest technologies coming in healthcare. And so making sure that the ecosystem leans into that equity and makes sure that the new solutions, the new technologies are broadly applicable, are three quick things that we've seen as we've kind of gone around the country looking at awesome companies.
Outstanding. One of the gaps that's been pointed out in this conversation and by others is that talented faculty at Rice University or at a TMC healthcare institution don't necessarily have the entrepreneurial skills. How do we equip them with better awareness and the right skill set that they need to be successful? What do you think, Kush?
Well, gosh, we could spend a whole panel on that, but I'd love to circle back. This sort of feeds a little bit into this. This connectivity is critical because this entrepreneurship in life sciences is extremely dynamic, and again, to be making sure that one has a finger on the pulse through people and ecosystems that are outside of here as well, to really make sure that there's true relevance and timely relevance of whatever the innovation is, that the problem being solved is truly one that is being uniquely solved and very potently solved by your solution in the grand scheme of things, relative to a very busy and very active and very dynamic, field. So I think that is critical. And so for example, I mean, if Rice is thinking about de-risking early technology concepts with students and faculty members who are developing those breakthroughs, what I've seen, work really well with other, major institutions that are trying to do that and have funding mechanisms to do that. It's the funding for sure, but bringing groups from the extended investment community, and not just here, but the best investors everywhere, to come to the table, who I think and I've seen are very interested to spend time with those efforts, to say, listen, these are the precious resources you have to do the de-risking, do it this way, because that's going to give you the biggest mileage when you're going out there into the quote real world of raising outside capital. And I think that's where the education starts, right? Yeah. Of saying, like, this is how that community is going to look at this because of this company that's out there or this other sort of barrier you're going to find. So make sure you're addressing them, up front. I think that's a critical ingredient early on. The second thing is clearly talent. We haven't touched on this yet, but in terms of one of the ingredients that is critical, yes, I mean, founding scientists and founding academics are tremendous, bring unparalleled passion to a new effort. We all know that is rarely sort of the end of the journey, right? It's usually just the beginning, and those efforts and those teams need to be complemented with executives that can go the distance. And I think I'd love to hear my colleagues' perspectives on that. My sense is that is something that needs to be worked on a little bit within Houston, but there's tremendous potential. And I will say, with all that the financial markets have done in biotech in the past year, I do think that we're entering an era of a renormalization. Things were there were pretty heady days for a couple of years here. And I think in an environment where things are more rational, more reasonable, you're looking for an optimal way to build a company. There's so many resources one can tap into here. That might have been undervalued a little bit when money was so easy to come around. And I think as we go back to basics and fundamentals, I actually think these resources, CPRIT, and all these mechanisms that have been built here actually will be really, really valuable and lure more talent as well.
It's a great point, Kush. I think we all recognize that human capital and executive talent is really critical here. David, what are your thoughts on that, and how we can create a greater abundance of that locally, similar to what you might see in Boston or San Diego?
I think what happens on the coasts, particularly California, particularly Silicon Valley and Boston, better than almost any other place on the planet, is the ability to recognize, price, and forgive risk. Everywhere else in the world, just about, that risk-taking capacity for entrepreneurs, for leaders, for researchers, for academicians is penalized instead of celebrated. And I think by, to Kush's point, when you infuse or import talent locally, hopefully some of that risk, that risk-taking vibe comes with them. And folks learn to lean in and take a little bit of risk and be challenged, especially from the entrepreneurial side. Now that's got to be supported and embraced by the community that says it's okay to take that risk. It's okay to fail, right? Because we can redouble and come back and take a little bit more perspective and attack at a different angle. But without that, it just you have gun shy entrepreneurs. And so that to me limits or caps innovation, but also becomes really slow to bring those most innovative products to light.
If I can jump in real quick. So it's interesting about Houston. Houston isn't gun shy, or ain't gun shy since we're in Texas. So what's wonderful about Houston is the community really does enjoy taking risks because we want to solve the problem. Whatever the problem is, Houston is a problem-solving city. It's a part of the culture, right? The moonshot, right? We just had the 60th anniversary. That's why so many people from Rice are shuttling back and forth. It was the Kennedy speech. We go to the moon not because it's easy, but because it's hard. We want to do that, right? It's a part of the DNA of the city. The artificial heart was built here, right? It was built at Rice, installed by Michael DeBakey. Just think of the idea of making a absolutely foreign device and sticking it in your body, this incredible machine that's going to pump blood. We're just going to replace the entire heart. These are the kinds of risks we take, right? And it's intrinsic because Houston tries to build itself together, right? And that's why you have this community of folks who really want to push that forward. Now, one thing we do not have yet is that connectivity in thought. We don't talk to each other enough. I think one of the reasons that Rice Management Company really founded the ION was to catalyze that, right? And you're starting to see that. You see the energy in this room, especially this morning with everybody here before they had to go get their kids from school, which is why I think it's thinned out here. But I think what we see is that so many people want to now plug in, and they want to know where are their kindred spirits. And now you have a place to do that, right? And now you can actually form it. The other thing that you can do is really to the education question. Of course, that's the heart of our university. We have some of the best entrepreneurship training on the planet, I would argue. And I could argue that. There's actually Kyle Judah's in the background there. Raise your hand, Kyle. There he is. Kyle Judah runs Lilly, which is our innovation entrepreneurship unit at Rice. It is really training PhDs and bachelor students to start companies. We have the foundations and the formation of that. We've shamelessly stolen as much as we can from our wonderful peer institutions of Stanford and MIT. We brought it here. We bring in the community here, right? So we bring in VCs to talk to our folks. What we used to do in secret, we're now doing in public, right? We're sort of coming out of the closet about this, that we are going to really foster it. So you're seeing that, and the students are actually resonating with it. And what's really remarkable is our faculty are resonating with it, right? Our faculty want to drive forward and do this. And the one comment I get from our faculty as well as our students is just get the hell out of the way. We want to drive. We want to go. Do not get in the way. Reduce all the damn barriers that come out of tech transfer and other offices. And I'm not saying our tech transfer is particularly bad. What the reality is the industry needs a reboot, and we're going to help reboot it. And that's part of the innovation ecosystem we're building.
Go ahead.
I will say one, just to get a little tactical. I mean, with certain approaches, a lot of the, I don't want to call them leading, but very active venture capital firms, talent is top of mind constantly. And no matter what ecosystem you're in, it's actually even tougher in some of these robust ecosystems because attrition rates are high and it's very, very competitive, the talent piece. But executives and entrepreneurs in residence and venture partners has really been a construct that has been a way to deal with that, to make sure that you really do have people that you consider, quote, backable, very experienced, could handle maybe more than one company at a time. And I remember I was a Kauffman Fellow, with some of you I'm sure know what that is. It's a program that was educational for me early in my career. And my project was actually look at regional efforts to build biotech ecosystems, around the country. That was fascinating. And the most I think innovative and sensible construct that I found in all those efforts was Siebert's EIR effort. In fact, there was an EIR program that I said, gosh, that is fascinating, where there was a funding mechanism to fund an EIR with firms that are well-established firms. So you eliminate the kind of the barrier for them to have that with someone who's obviously committed and interested in building a company here, of course, right? So I thought it was a very clever tool. I'm not sure how many EIRs were funded through that mechanism, but I thought it was fascinating. And large institutions can support these. It doesn't have to be secret per se, and sort of address some of those bottlenecks and recruit people here.
The new term of art that I love about that is MVP or MVC, minimally viable community. You've got to have that before it can attract the level of investment and interest. You've got to have that. The community must be built before the investment and the EIRs, the layer of management that's missing, can come into the community.
Yeah.
One of the things I saw when I was in Toronto to that point was creative destruction labs, and some of you may be familiar with that. It's a construct that came out of the University of Toronto and the business school that brought together scientists and innovators in a unique community that was citywide. And that really helped to foster a kind of climate. And CDL has taken off now, is in several cities in North America and 4 sites in Europe as a way to create this minimal viable community. Something that we might consider for Houston.
I think it's nascent right now. We should foster that, especially across TMC and other more traditional universities, right? This would be the best way to do it. We have quite a bit of that. There actually, some of you probably know there was for a long time, about nearly 15 years, we've had the life science entrepreneurship class at Rice. Jack Gill taught this class here at Rice, and I co-taught it for a few years prior to the pandemic. This actually was for PhD and MD students, and folks at the Texas Medical Center was actually the majority of people who would come to our class to learn how to do entrepreneurship. And it really galvanized the community. There's a lot of people, actually, our wonderful friend David Allison came out of that, right? And Michelle.
Yes.
Michelle.
Yes.
Who's at 5am Ventures right now. And
yes,
that
we have
really,
2 Rice alumni, just to be clear, at 5 a.m.
And I mean, it's an amazing thing. And why did they do it? It was because of that class, and it's because there was this underground effort of people who were bioengineers and techie nerds who wanted to do this, but the traditionalists didn't want to go down that road and train them. And so the business community and the tech community, we kind of formed an underground movement, and Jack was a big part of that. It's such a revolution. I can't overstate this. It really is a remarkable time because you have people like myself, who's a PhD and just wants to be in the lab, wanting to actually be open about creating new technology and getting it over the hump of being able to get into people's lives. That is an amazing thing, and the more people that talk about that as an option, I think you're going to see a lot more change, and we're certainly seeing that in Houston, right? And I do find that in Silicon Valley. I find that in Boston when we talk to people. And one of the things, like you said, about connectivity, they're very open in those communities. They're very open about what kind of deals they're making, right? They're always talking about it.
Yes.
And I think this kind of place at the ION, we're going to be talking a lot more about that. That's one of the reasons this was constructed, so we can openly exchange what's the hot topic, what's the hot new technology that we're looking at. And maybe we can all form some density around it and really own that space. Because that solution will have a great impact. That's one thing that we're really forging ahead on.
I think the Houstonians in the room really know and understand that Rice University and the University of Houston are part of the solution here, because we need human capital that comes from our own community that really wants to stay here, has deep roots here, to be trained in this way. One of the most effective programs that I'm familiar with, and probably my panelists are also, is the MIT program and how entrepreneurship has been integrated into undergraduate curriculum. With a multi-step module that many undergraduates participate in, and it gives them the foundations of entrepreneurship. Is that something that you're thinking about at Rice, or?
We're actually doing it. And so, again, it's a broken record. Kyle's back there smiling. I can see him from here smiling. But that is what we are doing at Rice. And what we want to do is welcome as many of the community as possible. We're doing it, and it's not just us. Other schools are doing it in the area as well. But certainly Rice is really trying to lead the effort on this. We want the brightest people across the country to know that we are not only open to it, it's a part of our entrepreneurship core that we want the undergrads to really start a lot of their companies. And what's remarkable is the undergrads are not jaded by experience. And so they want to go forward, and so they're going, doe-eyed into this. We're trying to make sure that they're not running into some headlights or oncoming train of some sort. They're looking down that bright light and seeing possibilities. We want to create that. That's what Kyle's doing. Also, Brad Burt was here earlier from the Rice Alliance. I think you all know we have the largest business plan competition in the world that Brad runs. All of these sorts of efforts, right? People need to know that Houston is the place to come. If you really want to start companies, especially in the health tech space, I think this is where we're going with TMC3 and everything you all are doing. These are the things that we want to foster. And it's a part of our natural DNA. But it's not a forced fit. It's actually very normal for us now. So hopefully that message will get out and we'll be able to convey that a little bit clearer.
The interesting thing, the story that I heard from the MIT folks is that when they brought this idea forward at the university level, the main objectors were the faculty. And so they turned it upside down and exposed the undergraduates to it, and now they've really changed the culture at the university in a backwards sort of bottom-up way. It's a really interesting story.
Yes.
Yeah, just one more thing. I'm bragging a lot, but here's one more thing.
You should. That's part of the thing. Sell the story. You got to sell the story.
We were talking earlier about how we don't brag enough about Houston, and David made a great point. It's a Southern thing. You're from
I'm a son of the South. I'm from
Yeah.
Louisiana, and it's just not. You find that it just it comes off as braggadocious, and it's just really inelegant to yell about how good you are. And I said there's 19-year-old kids at Stanford who have a napkin that are bragging to the Wall Street Journal that they've been able to bring the newest innovation. And I think that when you've got the best university, you should yell about it. And I think it's not braggadocious if it's backed up by data.
Well, so the data he just teed this up. Our ranking just went up today in U.S. News. We went from 17 to 15. So we're the only top 20 university in the state of Texas. But now we're the only, we're in the top 15 in the entire country. So I think this is a wonderful thing. But the idea is, thank you. That's very good. So we need to be able to say, we still feel uncomfortable. It's a Southern thing. But we also have the largest medical center. We produce 60% of the chemicals of this country, right? Everything that you guys are wearing right now has some product in it that came from Houston. I mean, if you think about that, you think about the impact, right? And you think about what we can do in healthcare. These are the places we got to go. But the missing element has been this entrepreneurship, creating the community to be able to start companies. It's been here. It's been quiet. I think we're forming the density around it. I think it's going to be a very exciting time.
One point I want to come back to is the connectivity part that we talked about earlier. And the Houstonians here know a little bit about TMC3. Some of you probably know a lot about it. A 37-acre greenfield project that brings together academic partners, including MD Anderson, the University of Texas Health Sciences Center at Houston, and Texas A&M, together with industry partners. And that is going to be phenomenal for us. The independent economic analysis projects 26,000 new jobs for Houston, which is important as we diversify our economy. We've got world-class architects. The firm involved is David Manfredi's firm from Boston. They did Kendall Square, and so they know a lot based on their experience of what is required to create the ecosystem for connectivity. So from your experience in Boston with Kendall Square, you've probably been to some of the restaurants there, Kush.
All of them.
Tell us what you've seen in Boston, being in that environment for a while and seeing Kendall Square come up. That's what we want to create here.
Wow. So that didn't happen overnight. I will say that, but I will say that there are all the foundation of the ingredients are here, because why did that ecosystem develop the way it did? It had phenomenal basic science institutions. It had proximity to clinical research centers and medical schools as well. That's all here happening in abundance. A range of disciplines: engineering, finance, data sciences. It's not just medicine, right? You do need a diversity of backgrounds for sure. There was capital. There was some risk capital there in Boston and in New York that initially got some of the industry going, and an early generation that I'm not sure one has here just yet, where you have the Biogen formed in 1970, right? Some of those steadily growing big juggernauts that emerged, and those can then spawn a next generation of entrepreneurs and companies as well. And I think in openness, every 18 of the top 10 pharma in the world now have a presence there. So I do think that proximity to those larger companies is also critical. It's not just entrepreneurship, because you're meeting with these people who are in big organizations, which is a virtuous cycle, right? I mean, 6 of the medicines, I did mention the statistic of the 50 FDA approvals were from pharma. So they need the entrepreneurial companies to be coexisting with them. And so I think attracting large companies here, which I think is the case in the medical device arena, maybe less so in biotech, but Johnson & Johnson's here, maybe others can come here as well. That is important, because you learn a lot about what the ultimate partner and commercializer and acquirer needs as well. And great restaurants and good, a good bar scene definitely helps to have a lot of networking events as well.
We have the restaurants and bars.
There you go.
Just for the record.
But we need them in the TMC. That's the point.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
In the many meetings that I've had with David Manfredi from Elkis Manfredi, I said to him, David, here's my litmus test for success. The Houstonians will understand this immediately as soon as I say this. When the residents of West University say, let's go to the TMC for dinner tonight, you've been successful.
That's right. That's right.
And that's what we're looking for. I said to him, 1 Starbucks is a requirement, 2 is a gold star, and an Apple store is really what we're striving for. So we've got a ways to go, but that's really what we're thinking about. And that's that opportunity has been created by the academic partners and industry partners giving up the ground floor in all the buildings for retail space. And that creates opportunities for restaurants,
Yes.
For bars, for the Starbucks, and for Apple to get situated in the TMC.
I've seen certain initiatives and events that are very deliberate in what kinds of communities they're trying to bring together. For example, in Boston and also in New Haven as well, I've seen certain events that bring people from the medical community and people from the business community, and certain types of events where they actually have to pair up and team up, for example. And it just creates these collisions that are, I think, really fun and interesting, and you generate a lot of new ideas and education, and some exciting plans and entrepreneurship that comes out of it as well. I found that to be very intriguing overall. And by connectivity, I think there's local, which I think you have to. It sounds like there's so much potential that's untapped. But it's also ease for someone. I mean, for someone like myself, I'm privileged that I'm partnered with Guillermo and Sandy, and I can, when I come here, I know exactly who I should be talking to, where I should go. The ease is so great. So and the productivity of the interactions are tremendous. I think for that sort of open door for anyone to feel and know that that's the case for Houston.
Yes.
It's intimidating. It's a huge place to navigate, I would say, if you're not already plugged in. So.
I think it's important for all stakeholders to have a single point person that can be the go-to person for you, Kushan. I was saying in the session before we started, we have somebody like that that oversees our tech transfer office. Every faculty member at MD Anderson knows Farhan Pratt. He is a PhD, understands the science, can speak science to the scientists, understands the interface to the various forms of commercializing our technology, and I think that helps enormously. On the practical side, he sits right in front of the coffee shop. He's got a dedicated chair. Everyone knows that's Farhan's chair. And the faculty members know they can just sit down in front of him, have a cup of coffee and a latte, talk science, and Farhan will help them to understand what we can do with their technology. That kind of individual who's recognized throughout the environment, throughout our institution or at the university, as being on the side of the faculty, wanting to help them, in a position to know how to commercialize their innovation. That's exactly what every institution needs, I think, to be successful. And the solution is not necessarily that every faculty member should become a free agent, because they oftentimes lack the understanding. They get taken advantage of many times. And this is really our responsibility, I think, as leaders of institutions to make sure we have the right talent to do that.
So one other thing on that, we have a faculty member who just recently spun out a new neurotech interface called Motif is the company. And he's taking a sabbatical, and it's remarkable. He's somebody I consider a genius level individual. And the reason he's actually just taking the sabbatical is he wants to get the company up and running. But one of the things that we're also challenged with is finding a good community of CEOs who can actually run these tech startups, especially these med tech startups, especially something that's much more on the bleeding edge of the science, right? So neurotech is something that's going to be the next wave of many new technologies coming from the med side. So how do you foster that? And how do you actually grow something like that? And how do you keep that company from leaving, right? So this is another thing we want to make sure.
Yes.
We want that community to stay, right? Otherwise, you're not going to have that wonderful, rich community that you see and the cultures that you see in Silicon Valley and Boston. So this is something that we're, again, reduce the barriers, make sure that these folks know that they're not only welcome, that they're loved, and we're also not only wanting them here just for our own personal reasons, but we think that we can actually foster these companies better than other areas. We need people to know that. And so Motif is one of those. We have a lot of med tech companies coming out like that. And we don't want the faculty to actually leave the university. We want them to keep generating new startups from the university. We have another professor at Rice. His name is Jim Tour. In the chemistry department, he has 13 companies he started at a valuation of $1 billion now, which is amazing. Battery tech, all sorts of fundamental materials. And he's a big part of the new Welch Institute, where we're making new materials, making advanced materials that will penetrate the healthcare space as well. He does have some biotech that he's doing with, he has these graphene motors that under UV light will drill into a cell as a cancer therapy, a targeted therapy. Very similar to Nanospectra, which also came out very early here in Houston, which is a phenomenal company that uses gold nanoshells to focally treat prostate cancer. They're very close to getting FDA approval. These are the remarkable things that are happening in Houston because we take those risks, right? And we don't have enough of a density of people who know about it, but I think that's part of what we want to make sure people know, that we can actually do those things that are difficult here. And that's something that the university should really be investing in, right? We shouldn't be doing the simple thing.
By not wanting the company to leave, may I ask, is there openness or interest in trying to think of models where there's a substantial R&D base here and another site somewhere else in the country or in some other place? Is that would that
absolutely
be considered leaving in your mind?
It wouldn't be considered leaving, it'd be partnering, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. We need to be able to do that,
Yeah.
right? If you look at Silicon Valley and the history of Kendall Square even, right? They didn't just do everything there, right?
No.
And so that's the other side of it. And what ends up happening is when people visit Houston, a lot of people in this room probably have done this. Once you visit here and you get a sense of it, you go, oh yeah, this is actually cool, and you end up staying. Because you usually come here and you say, I'm just going to do a few years, and then you end up just living here. And I think that's the other part of it.
Yeah, that's right.
You got to bring people so that they know.
That's right.
Get them hooked on it.
Before closing, I want to go to a few of these audience questions for you. This is a really good one. What impact, if any, do you believe augmented reality will have on the healthcare industry?
Look, we're investors in a company that is using AR for surgical training. And in the wake of the pandemic, you saw these wonderful boondoggle conferences that surgeons go to were just shut down. So nobody was going to the Cayman Islands to learn the newest, cardio techniques. And so the ability to leverage some type of AR, VR technology to train surgeons, to enable healthcare providers, from surgeons to med techs, to be able to deliver really complicated, nuanced, new breakthrough technology, it's one of the most cost-effective, error-proof ways of training, healthcare professionals by using, animations of the body to be able to look at all sorts of edge cases, let alone just the average the average sort of application of that technology. I think it's here to stay. I think it's going to only increase because it's incredibly cost effective. And I think it's a great way for the visualization of the human body and sort of the ability to sort of do the work to happen. And so I think we're in inning one of this, but I think as the technology improves, as the ability to go basically from like a CT or MRI to actually a real visualization of that particular body, so the customization of that AR, VR, I think we're just scratching the surface for what's possible here.
Thank you. This is an excellent closing question for all of us. Are private equity and venture capital investments positively or negatively affecting healthcare?
I think they're positively affecting it. I think that they are starting to drive more than anything innovation out of the lab and into the provider's office, into the care offices. And I think, I'm obviously long venture capital, I'm a venture capitalist, but I think that the role of inspiring entrepreneurship to elevate and expedite innovation into the hands of consumers is incredibly powerful, and I think that applying that to logistics or cybersecurity or especially healthcare, which affects each of us in the room, I think it's critical. And I think my venture capital colleagues and I are really excited about making investments in the future because we know that we're just learning a lot about the body and about the healthcare process, and the more that we can invest in that, I think the better and the faster we'll see more productive outcomes.
That's a great note to end on. I want to thank our panelists for being here today. Thank all of you for staying for the very last session. It's been a terrific session. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Pisters. Really, thank you.
But before we leave, just a couple quick comments. Love the creativity of this group, but one thing, surely I'm not the only one who had noticed, the most amazing socks on the podium. Cush's socks say 5 a.m. It's pretty cool. I think that's Gwyneth Paltrow approved, I'm just saying. But on a more serious note, love all the creativity up here, socks and beyond. Importantly, Kush is pushing us a little bit to consider hybrid models with regard to talent. Maybe we don't have every single element in our city, but we have lots of the elements, and hybrid models might be the way to get started. I think that's a really important point. Want to thank very much our VCs who flew long distances to be a part of this, to meet you, to share their wisdom with us. We are such proud limited partners of Revolution and Rise of the Rest, and very appreciative of David. Also to 5 a.m., Kush and David Allison, Michelle Ho, as you said, many native Houstonians who are part of their very fine group focus on therapeutics as well as digital health. So really appreciate that. Pull-chair Curry is already just changing the world in 3 weeks, so I can't wait to see what happens in 3 years. And couldn't be more honored really to have Dr. Pisters, who's leading the world leader in oncology and beyond. What an honor to have you sharing your wisdom with us today. So thanks, everybody.